Hey friends, welcome to the Droning On Podcast. I'm excited for you to be able to enjoy the episode today. If you enjoy it half as much as I enjoyed making it, you're going to have a great time. Today my guest is my good friend Jeremy Kingsbury. He runs the Wetootwaag Bagpipe and History podcast. We've got a few links to episodes that come up in this interview in the show notes. We're also talking about his album that he recently put out called Pipemaker. I'll also have links to that down below. And that album, a physical copy of that album, is the prize this month over at our Patreon page. About every month we do a drawing amongst all patrons, and they get a prize. And this month the prize is a physical copy of this album. So might be worth checking that out. That's over there at patreon.com/DroningOnPodcast. What else? You can also buy stuff from my little online shop, bagpipeswag.com. There's cool bagpipey stuff on there. And drummy stuff. I don't forget about the drummers. And if you want to follow the show on Facebook, we're on there. Just search for Droning On Podcast. If you like Instagram more, then there's droning.on.podcast. That's us on Instagram. And you can always email into the show at TheDroningOnPodcast@gmail.com. I'll get out of the way. Enjoy the interview. Enjoy the music. Jeremy's a really cool guy, and he makes some great music. So have fun. Bye. As you already know, that my daughter loves this song, and she loves to dance to it. And like she's a little kid, and she's done like ballet classes and stuff like that. But this one, she just loves to spin, That's spins awesome. And spins and spins. And I do like, maybe it's because of watching her do that, but it does feel to me like I can dig that. Like it's kind of a whirling dervish kind of feel to this hornpipe anyway. Maybe that's just me, but it does make me think, like, if this child who doesn't know anything of musical genres, etc., feels to stand and dance when this song is played, doesn't that speak to the original intent of this song, or at least the form, like, right. Was the intention always to make people dance?
Isn't that the intention of that's cool. That's really cool. And your daughter has some like dance training too, so it's not like any kid, their default dance is kind of to just spin around in circles for a lot of stuff, right? But, that your daughter has some like classical training, and that is her choice for that tune is kind of
That's the thing, yeah. Other songs she does a lot of like sort of the like leap to the side, raise your arms, kind of more what looks like sort of like Western structured classical dance, but this one, nope, it's like right back to the caveman days. She's just spinning. It just feels right.
It's the jaw harp that does
Maybe that's it.
Sure, right?
Maybe it's the jaw harp. Yeah. But and actually mentioning the jaw harp, maybe tell me a little bit about the jaw harp. Have you done much like deep thinking about reeds and how they developed and what it's like this like family of reed instruments that you're bringing together with your uilleann pipes and border pipes and jaw harp on this track, where it's almost like grandpa and a couple of cousins all playing together. You know what I mean?
No, I hadn't thought about that at all. I feel stupid for not thinking about reeds that way, and like I think I have a phobia of reeds, like as an uilleann piper that isn't particularly detail oriented. My reeds just scare me. Like they're just a thing of mystery.
Just pray that they keep working.
Right. Yeah. It's like the most. Yeah. Just the most religious I ever am is like, is the reed gonna work another day? And so I hadn't really thought about the relationship. For me, it was all just, it's the time period I'm interested in. Yeah. I like bagpipes, and then I started playing jaw harp just because it was such a common trade item, like in the fur trade, like in terms of musical instruments in North America. It was probably the most common thing. Like
I didn't know that. I mean, it makes sense. It's simple and you can put it in your pocket, right?
Right. It's like we used to joke that like jaw harps are to voyageurs what harmonicas are to cowboys, kind of thing. But the thing is too, I think jaw harps persisted even as harmonicas became popular. I think they were still around, and it was kind of a surprise when because I think of jaw harps as such a item of the kind of American and Canadian fur trade.
Yeah.
It was sort of surprising to see how big a part of Scottish music it was too. But again, it's an impoverished instrument too. So like the big thing, I've got that in Patrick MacDonald's, the essays in front of Patrick MacDonald's collection from 1784 or whatever. The essay mentions that St. Kilda, everybody just sings there, the only instrument they have being the trump or the jaw harp. And,
I didn't know that was that when he says the trump that means the jaw harp.
Yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah. Jaw harps have so many stinking names, right?
They do, yes. And some of them I've wondered, like, are we allowed to say that? Is this politically acceptable
right.
at present?
Yeah. The Jew's harp is.
Yeah.
That's how it shows up most often. I kind of like the explanation. Like, it's such a funny thing too, where people try to figure out what the name meant, and you can kind of hear, like, this is a child's interpretation of another word. I like jaw harp because, like, that's describing sort of what the thing is.
Yeah.
It's actually not a term that probably was used historically too much. But my favorite explanation of the Jew's harp is that a child, like, would call it a juice harp because of somebody playing it and kind of slobbering over
Getting all slobbery.
right. That it's actually a juicy it's a juicy harp.
It's a juicy harp.
But yeah. But yes, that's sort of how it started. And then when I realized, like, I bought all these jaw harps that are, look like fur trade ones, so tiny and not really tuned, like Morjangs or whatever. And it doesn't. Do I still have you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just enjoying carry on.
Yeah. Sorry, my computer. It's funny. I've definitely heard other guests on the show be like, "Wait, my computer just went to sleep."
Yes. Yep. Clean
Anyway,
feed doesn't
I
keep
had
it
this.
active.
Right. I had this Jaws harp, and it didn't really play to pitch with any of my pipes. And then after talking with Dave Barrett, who's a cool dude and a piper out east someplace, kind of around Washington, D.C., but he was talking about taking classes with Alan MacDonald and talking about jaw harp, and I was like, "What? I can do this stuff? Like, this is allowable? I can add jaw harp?" And so then I figured out that one of my jaw harps is sort of close in pitch to a whistle I had, and then I just ordered one that was pitched in A. And now at this point, I'm like, I think I got to get a D one too, because the A jaw harp sounds fine with uilleann pipes so long as border pipes are also going, but like it doesn't sound great if it's just uilleann pipes and an A whistle and an A jaw harp. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that there was any precedent for the use of jaw harp in Scottish music until I heard you doing it, and so I appreciate the passing on of the epiphany, because it's brought some joy, and that's because of that. So for years I also had just like this little tiny cheap little jaw harp that I thought that was all a jaw harp was,
Right.
And it wasn't until listening to you play jaw harp that I went, oh, that sounds cooler, and started doing some digging. And now I only have one decent jaw harp, but I like it a lot. It is in D, and it rumbles. I love that low sound.
Yeah, I went on I feel foolish because I bought a Russian one. I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah, there's like
Vargan,
is that like,
I think is what they're called, Vargans maybe. But it's cool. It's got that big, like,
yes,
it's like that meditative stuff that people do
totally.
for like trance playing. That's great. But I used it for a while on like the bonus episode intro stuff, and it shows up on earlier episodes of the podcast. And that once I got just a Morjang an A, I was like, okay, I'm gonna quit playing the Lighthouse. This is not like this sound. That's not really a good folk music sound.
It puts me more in the mind of Daft Punk.
something like that. And it's I love it, but it's hard to make it work there. But there's a cool Cormac Begley did a Irish Traditional Music Archive, or ITMA, has these cool Going to the Well series that are kind of really high production value videos of just gifted artists, musicians kind of playing through tunes and talking about the history of the tunes. They had an episode on Jack Lattin, which was awesome. And anyway, but Cormac Begley, who's this amazing kind of box player, concertina player, he did one about jaw harp and Irish music too, which is kind of neat to see how common it is. It's such a useful instrument to just have around, and of course with the benefit of microphones and things, you can make them loud enough to match.
Right, to play along with pipes.
Yeah, recorded piping, but
yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad to go back to Mr. Preston's hornpipe a little bit. I'm glad your daughter likes that track. I almost cut it because I don't like Mr. Preston's hornpipe is a tune I absolutely love. It was my first exposure to Pete Stewart, I guess, was seeing when I was looking around for 18th century music. He had a YouTube video up of him playing it, and I think it was called 18th century hornpipe or something, which is how it showed up on my search results. And years before, I don't know, I consider Pete a friend now because we've hung out many times on Zoom over the pandemic, and like even back then years ago when we didn't know each other from Adam, he was just really kind with his time. When I was like, what's going on here?
What are you doing, man?
Yeah,
Teach me how.
It was my first exposure to closed fingering too, where you kind of get that pippity poppity sound.
Yes. We're gonna talk about a track where you do some of that later. That's one of my favorite tracks on the album for sure.
Oh, cool. But yeah, he was really kind with his time, and so I loved Mr. Preston's hornpipe. And then ironically, when I got his book, because it's a weird collection of tunes that it's in. It's a set of Lancashire hornpipes, and like Lancashire is not technically the borders, right? It's like a county. It's a county south of the border, I guess. So it's not on the border of Scotland and England. But the tunes in there are very much like would feel comfortable in that kind of Northumbrian Dixon repertoire. But they are distinct. And like Mr. Preston's hornpipe, I don't think shows up any place except for that collection, or at least maybe not until later. But it's a super long take, and Pete's writing about it in his collection. He kind of complains about how monotonous the variations are, like how it's not particularly complex stuff.
Sure.
Which I kind of didn't believe. I was like, no, this is some of the most interesting stuff ever until I was trying to figure out how to play it on uilleann pipes, and playing that on uilleann pipes is a pain, and I still wasn't really happy with it. I wasn't happy with it when I recorded it for the podcast, because when I'm recording stuff for the podcast, it's like I'll sit down for an hour trying to play the same tune, and get something that I'm pleased with, and I wind up probably throwing out plenty of decent takes, and by the end I settle with something, but then listening back to that track, months later, I was like, oh no, that's good enough. That's pretty darn good.
Right. After an hour of struggling with it, maybe you're kind of sick of it at that point, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely not a melody that lends itself to uilleann pipes at all. But yeah, I like the tune so much, I wanted to include it someplace. It was important to me, this album was to help offset the cost of getting a set of pipes from John Swain. And specifically, I wanted John Swain pipes because, his pipes are really good they're good, they're great pipes, but they're also kind of affordable, and they very much are part of like English and border piping traditions in terms of what the chanter sounds like, the range that it can do, and the album sales specifically were to help offset the cost of getting an additional chanter from him so that I could play the English style kind of border tunes. Like all of the people, so English bagpipes are generally pitched in G, and it can cause some frustration when you're looking at border pipe music. Like if you're getting a collection of tunes of like, music for border pipes, and it's from an English piper, they'll all be set in G. And if you're getting it from like Matt Seattle's book or something farther north, it's all kind of set in A, and it can really throw you for a loop when you first.
You just have to squint and imagine that the notes are one step higher or lower, right?
And it's like, I don't know. I heard that you got the William Dixon book, but I don't know. If I don't know if you read the intro there, but
I'm like halfway through the intro. It's honestly, it's longer than I expected it to be, and so
right.
I read a few pages and then went to some tunes, and then went back and read a little bit, and then went to some tunes.
Yeah, I feel so called out so don't feel like I'm calling you out for not having read it. The detail is just that it's interesting that Dixon's original manuscript didn't have a 5-stave line or a 5-line stave. It was a 4-line stave. So it's sort of up for debate where Dixon.
How interesting!
Like how it should look. But I remember when I was doing that chat with Keith Sanger recently, which is I guess the first episode of season 6 or something. But he was talking about the Kilberry Book of Kilmore, and
that was the Myths and Legends episode, right?
Yeah,
and, great episode. I love that one.
He was talking about all the the introduction to the Kilberry book, talks about how this is wrong, but it's a place to be. And he asked if you read this, and I was like, I have, or he mentioned that nobody reads it, and I was like, I haven't read it, and he was like, well, I hope you leave that in. You better not go around as soon as I get a book of music, it's like, I just want to look at the tunes. I have a really hard time
naturally,
going to actually read the thing.
Yeah.
Again, going back to Pete Stewart, he's got some amazing history books on piping and kind of piping in the Scottish borders and England, and but it's just the tunes. I'll read a paragraph or two, and then I'll just let's just go look at the tunes though.
Yeah,
really good. Anyway, so since this was to fundraise Borderpipes, I wanted to
Borderpipes
include,
specifically. Yeah,
I wanted to include tracks from sort of my heroes in that repertoire and people that had exposed me to it. So I wanted to have a track that, to me, is a Pete Stewart track, even though Pete didn't write Mr. Preston's Hornpipe by any stretch of imagination, but he published one of the easier ways to get it, and that was my gateway to it, which is also why there's an Ian Gelston tune on there, which is Shields Bar. And then the Matt Seattle track, Apple Trees, is Michael Better and Old Gala House. That was all sort of include these things in here so I can have a nod to them.
Right. No, that makes sense. Now I want to ask you more about Borderpipes specifically, but maybe we cut to a tune that features them a little bit before talking about them. Maybe track 15, which is that minuet. We're also talking about dancing anyway, so another dance tune. It was, so the way that I look for music to play and kind of how I want to approach it is often very podcast centered, and as the more podcasts that I've done, the more I'm trying to be more methodical about it, I suppose, and that means if I play a tune, I wind up wanting to explore some of the various settings of it, which is I think it's a more useful podcast. It's certainly a more interesting podcast, I think, to my listeners. They seem to like it when I'm playing through half a dozen or more kind of variations of the same tune. Yes, I remember you doing that with the Gold Ring, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun, but it's way. I don't know.
It's fun for us, but not for you.
It is fun for me. I enjoy playing the different settings, but some of them wind up being quite difficult. And it means that I have a very large list of I don't know if I'm ever going to feel like I can quite pull that setting off.
Yeah.
And then what's the point of doing the episode if I can't have that in there? But anyway, in William Dixon's book, there's a number of tunes. There's not a number, but there are some tunes that don't have concordances that are sort of standalone tunes. And I think that Minuet is one of those, which was, and it's a nice kind of short tune. A lot of Dixon's tunes are very long and quite long in the variations, which also provides its own challenges. But yeah, this tune, I think if I remember the liner notes that Matt has in there, it's sort of bizarre. There's not a lot of minuets in Dixon. Like, this is sort of the only one, I think. And he couldn't find any concordances to it. And it's sort of a bizarre title. That doesn't, it's kind of hard to know where this tune's coming from. But I love it. It's I love that beat to it. It's quite a bit different, I think, than some of the other stuff in Dixon. And yeah, it's good. I haven't done it yet. It's weird that I have started paying really close attention to country dance music in the pandemic, and like I've played briefly for some kind of country dance settings, but just like the fur trade versions of it. So like rather than doing the formal country dancing where I would like watch the band play and people dance, but I wasn't playing music for it. So the only like dance I've played for was a paddle dance, which
a paddle dance.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a thing anywhere other than
that's what they do on your birthday, right?
Right. No, the paddle dance is so it's supposedly, I'm not sure who cooked it up or when. I've seen it in reenacting circles and at like Franco Manitoban communities doing it, so like Métis folks and things like that too. But it's like you have a person, there's one person that has the paddle, right? So there'll be like a woman with a paddle, and then two men will dance for her affection, and then she will hand the paddle to the one she doesn't want to dance with, and then those two just kind of do their own run dance through the line of men and women that are waiting. And then the guy that's been rejected, he has the paddle, and then two women come and dance for his attention. So it's kind of a nice, like, you've been rejected, but now you get to select the power choice. And those dances are always just like, you can play whatever you want and just do it forever.
And am I imagining, should I be imagining like fur trade just got off the river with a bunch of beaver pelts, so it's a boat paddle, or should I be imagining more like
it's a canoe paddle.
It is a canoe paddle. Okay, so it's not like some dainty ping pong paddle. We're talking a full-on canoe paddle. Okay.
Yeah, it's generally like the ones that I remember. It seems like we're trying to use an avant paddle too, which is the kind of long paddle on the front of the canoe. Because those big freighter canoes, you've got kind of specialized people where the guy in the front of the canoe has a rather long paddle so they can stand and kind of push off rocks and things like that. So generally you're dancing for a paddle that's maybe like 6 or 7 feet tall or something.
Yeah.
It's a cool aesthetic, but yeah, I definitely became, if I'm really thinking about it, I'm better at playing strathspeys if I'm watching people dance.
That makes sense.
And
yeah.
I kind of want to, it's a thing that I look forward to doing if like the world ever opens back up, or I feel comfortable going out and about again, of like finding and paying closer attention to some country dance things that are going on. Like I have quite a few friends that do it through kind of the reenacting stuff, but I've just never paid much attention to it. But
there's a group here that my wife and I like to go do some of. They do mostly, they're called Old Glory Vintage Dancers, and the events we usually go to are a Regency era event and then also a Dickens Christmas ball, and so they're maybe not quite the exact same kind of dances, but I can get the feel for sure. And they're they are so fun to do too, especially when you get everybody in costume and you can just about lose yourself in it and think you're in a different place and a different time. It is a lot of fun.
The best experience I've ever had with that was there's an event in northern Minnesota, and they were doing kind of called country dancing, which in my head, going through grade school in the Midwest, I just assumed like, okay, they're just doing square dancing for some reason. I didn't even fathom to me that that square dancing came from another tradition or whatever. It's just, if you got somebody calling a dance, in my head, that's a square dance, and I'm disinterested.
Grab your partner around your
right. And so, but I was still watching, and it was great. The woman calling the dance was, giving everybody easy instructions to follow, and then it was dark out, like it was at a reenactment at night, so there were some lanterns around, but you couldn't really see what was going on. And so this couple started dancing quite differently than everybody else was, and the person calling the dance started to call them out to like tell them to get into formation, and then she realized that it was the kind of the couple reenacting or portraying the bourgeois or whatever, like the owner of
I
the
see.
trading post.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was just really interesting. It was a cool historical moment. For her to go, okay, you want to get in line? Oh, never mind. That's Mr. Kavanaugh.
You do
He
what
can do
you
what
want.
he wants. Everybody clear space for Mr. Kavanaugh. And then like just as my buddy like went dancing by as Mr. Kavanaugh, he just had the perfect silhouette of like Regency, hat. He had a Paris bow hat on and a rat tail cue kind of coming out the back, and it was just great. It was definitely like, oh yeah, this feels right. This feels like the way that class worked back then. But
yeah, no, that is awesome. And I was going to ask you about border pipes specifically. I'm still going to, but right now I feel like I'd rather ask you to give me just a little. We talked about it a little bit before when we talked, but like we're talking about reenacting and looking through archives of music and different centuries of the past. What is all this? What are you into? What is your podcast focused on? What's the reenacting stuff? What is this album? Like where is this album coming from? What's its time and place?
Yeah. So I have found myself kind of obsessed with the 18th century, I guess. So it's a really interesting time and place for looking at archive stuff. There's like you see such a golden age, kind of the first big mass publication of music and books and things of that sort. So that it means that there's a real robust archive of things to look at. So it's possible in a way that it's quite a bit more work to do like 17th or 16th century music history. It's certainly doable, and like there's printed material for then too, but
maybe not as big a body.
What's that?
Maybe not as large a body of work to go through.
Which in a way is nice too, right? You can just, if you just got a bunch of Playford stuff, you can kind of play all the printed music for the 17th century and feel like you did it.
There, I did all 100 years. It's done.
Yeah.
What are some 18th century landmarks for people listening? If it's hard to place, just based on numbers, what's going on in the era, or at least in the Western world at the time?
Everything. No,
this is when it all took off.
Yeah, it's it's an era of conflict, but it's also, well, okay, so I guess benchmarks, right? The middle of the century, for people interested in Scottish music, and history and stuff, like 1745, right, is the Jacobite Rebellion. It's kind of the last Jacobite Rebellion. There's an earlier one in 1715, and these attempts to kind of put a Stuart king back on the throne of England and Scotland, and that winds up playing a huge part in our mythological understanding of piping. There's this whole myth of bagpipes being outlawed after Culloden, which, again, please, that didn't happen, and but it's a good myth, but it absolutely didn't happen. And
call out to that. I'll put a link to that.
Go listen
episode.
To that long episode. There's I think pretty early on, Keith does a really good job of pointing out all the ways where it is obvious that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's an important benchmark. Even though bagpipes weren't banned, the kind of failures of the Jacobite Rebellion did have a big effect on music. The clan system was sort of canceled or not outlawed, but it ended. Like the way the clan system had worked before had ended. Something that I think Americans don't understand is that like the Stuarts actually were some of the first people to put limits on like powers of chiefs and clans to kind of make sure that they had all the power, right? Because a clan chief is essentially a king in his own country, so that's a threat to you as a king, right? So you want to stop that kind of power and authority. So the Stuarts have been trying to limit the power of the clans for a generation before the Jacobite rebellions. But anyway, with the end of like the clan system working as it had, you all of a sudden didn't have wealthy courts that could sustain pipers, and kind of music wound up shifting as a result of that, where you still had people performing for wealthy folks, but it wouldn't be the same thing. And there's also going to be some pretty big disruptions to like over the next century, from the 1740s on. There's going to be some pretty big disruptions and depopulation of small villages and communities as chiefs and landlords decide that it's more profitable to raise sheep rather than have tenants that are farming and doing that sort of thing. So people are being evicted from their homes, and if they can, moving someplace else. But so that's gonna be some pretty big disruption. Which, but again, that music, it's really to call out another episode. But towards the end of season 5 of the podcast, Barry Shears had a long talk. So much of Barry's work is looking at like we know where all these like hereditary piping families went. Like this seems like, oh man, the hereditary
Canada.
pipers died. Like no, they just moved to Nova Scotia and kept going in a lot of ways. So.
That was such a good episode. I'll put a link to that one as well. I listened to that one twice, like in succession. Like I finished it and was like, "Wow, that was great!" And I just went right back into it again.
Yeah, Barry's so great. But yeah, so it's and his collections of tunes are phenomenal too. For the same thing of like finding historic tunes, and he does a good job of listing concordances and things too.
Play it like you sing it is next on my list of collections to get. Even just the title, but hearing him talk about that, just like the value of like. This is music, like I like his sort of philosophy.
Yeah. Get it now. He's out, right? Like there's copies floating around. But so it's in 2 volumes, right? The first volume is all history and photos, and the second volume is some history, but mostly the tunes. Mm-hmm. And, so the second volume, he is out of copies. And you can still see a couple places where they've got like stockpiles, but before this episode goes, you should buy it.
Yeah. Good to know. Noted.
I ordered a copy from like someplace in Arizona. I'll see if I'll send you the link if you can't find it easily, but yeah, it's great. I'm hoping he'll do a reprint, but I kind of don't think he will. But yeah, it's good stuff. Anyway, so yeah.
What? Yeah, and you don't have to give an exhaustive history of the entire century, of course, just to give some people, to give people kind of an idea of like what are people wearing at the time, what's happening in the world,
sure.
What's kind of the
so for me, like if we've got the Jacobite Rebellion in 1745, which is sort of a big moment, then you've got immigration, then you've got the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, so this big conflict between England and France and indigenous people, and for me, that becomes interesting afterwards because I don't speak or read French at all, really. So once most of North America becomes, ruled by English writing political entities, like when they're making all that stuff, it just becomes more accessible to me. So the time period I'm interested in is kind of specifically 1763 to 1820, because that is when English-speaking fur traders are tramping around the places where I live and study, making records in a language I can read.
And of course, right in the middle of that, we've got 1776 for those listeners in the USA. That's there you go.
Yeah, American Revolution, and that's. It's really interesting too. Like we've got such a romantic idea of what the Scottish experience and history has been. So at least I did as a kid. The idea that you'd be a Jacobite,
I think we all
and then
do,
you'd be a Jacobite, and then you'd be forced to move to the Carolinas or something, and there you'd fight for American independence from the British King or something. But that's the opposite.
With your kilt on the entire time, of course.
Right, kilt on. Yeah, charging into a battle in the swamps of Georgia wearing
your kilt and carrying a claymore, not a gun, a claymore.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely needed a claymore. But the funny reality is that like they were loyalists. So there's this shift happens in quick succession of being Jacobites and then becoming loyalists. People fighting.
It is interesting
On the English side in the 7 Years' War, and then staying on the English side during the American Revolution.
Is that quick shift the kind of quick shift that would have happened across a generation from from parents to children, or like you'd have the same people fighting
Sometimes it's the same people.
Yeah.
For the French and Indian War, there are people that are Jacobites and are then officers in the British Army. It's sort of one of the reasons that kind of Highland soldiers gained this mythic sort of view, this being seen as really important and potent soldiers was like during the 7 Years' War. You've got like the Frasers had been I can't remember what the term is, but basically they had lost their titles and their land as a result of being Jacobites. And then, so during the 7 Years' War, they formed a regiment, the 78th Fraser Highlanders, I think, is what they're called. But they come over and fight a bunch of battles in North America. And, General Wolfe is in charge of the British forces I think for the entirety of the American campaigns. And Wolfe was at Culloden on the English side, on the government side, and supposedly kind of hated the Highland regiments. And so he would always send them in first, like, okay, cannon fodder, we're going to get rid of these Highlanders one way or the other. And then the Highlanders kept winning those encounters that they were supposed to be slaughtered in. And so they started to have this sort of mythic quality. And even while, even when it was still technically illegal to like carry swords and wear tartan, it became fashionable to have a Highlander show up to your parties in England, in London.
Right.
So very different kind of exoticizing of the people that may have been the boogeymen.
Just a few years earlier.
But a lot of those, like Fraser, I'm really interested in the Frasers just because they wind up like the Fraser Highland Regiment. A lot of those guys got land grants in upstate New York, and that's where like them and their kids wound up kind of living, and then their kids wind up being fur traders, but loyalists that wind up moving to Montreal like during the revolution, during the Revolution period, and kind of switch gears to running the fur trade out of Montreal rather than Albany or Schenectady. But
and you've spent a significant amount of time embodying a fur trade person.
I guess, yeah.
So aside from reading about it, you're living it as much as one can.
Yeah, I was really into reenacting first the Jacobite Rebellion and then the French and Indian War as a kid, and kind of as I got older, I had a moment when I was 18 where I was like, this is childish stuff. I'm gonna leave this behind. Like it had weirded me out. I had started doing Jacobite reenacting as a kid, living in Wisconsin, and I pretty quickly realized that there wasn't actually a lot of Jacobite history in Wisconsin, so I should maybe look to more local stuff.
Sure.
And there also isn't honestly a ton of kind of French and Indian War history in Wisconsin either, but that was closer than Scotland, so so I started doing that and kind of fell in with a group of people portraying Ojibwe warriors. Didn't think terribly critically of that at first.
Is that called red face when white people pretend to be
depends on
Native
who you're
American?
talking to.
I've had some like very uncomfortable experiences here with like in my experiences with the Boy Scouts where there would be like this Order of the Arrow, like not only dressing up like Native Americans but like changing the way you talk to sound like a stereotypical Native American accent, and just be like looking around, being like, Are we all doing this? Are we all hearing the same thing? Are we okay with this?
Yeah, you're not. You shouldn't be. I wanted to when I did I don't know. I had already become disillusioned with portraying a Native person, and I think I did it for like 2 years.
Yeah,
maybe less. And we're talking like I was 11 and 12, and then I got weirded out. So like the loophole always is you say, well, I'm a captive. Actually, I'm white.
There
but
you
I was,
go.
Kidnapped and raised,
There you go.
which is sort of whatever. It's not really any better. And I just kept on distancing myself more from it. And but I think I had kind of quit doing the Native as a like pretending to be Native thing. I started taking Ojibwe language classes, and like actually I think that's what it took, like being a preteen hanging out with Indigenous people, being like, oh, that's icky, that thing that we're doing is maybe a little bit icky. And then the more time I spent that I just started looking, I realized one of the challenges with reenacting is reenactors teach history more, like they reach more people than probably any other way of like moderately professional history. Like certainly as an academic historian, you can count on maybe 20 people to read your book. It's not really
and they're probably going to be your fellow academics as well.
Right. Yeah. Whereas a reenactor that's really active and goes to a lot of reenactments are going to, teach 1,000 people about something a weekend.
At every event.
And that becomes particularly fraught at like reenactments are fun. They're a fun thing to participate in. If you are from a certain like privileged position. But it's weird because you're presenting history. It's very much a kind of white middle class endeavor. So if people are only portraying whiteness, then it erases indigenous people, black people. It erases all those folks from the history. So like that's not good.
Yeah.
But then also when you have people that are not those things talking about it or portraying it, especially, it gets a little weird. One of the groups the group I was active in were pretty honest about their ethnicity. And then at some point after I left, they all had done some DNA tests where conveniently they all managed to prove that they were native.
Yeah.
And like, not only that, like, but now all of a sudden they had res accents. So it was weird. And I realized that for a lot of people going to those events, this was that's their first exposure to what they think is a native person. Is
maybe only exposure ever.
Right, but seeing them covered in war paint, doing war hoops and scalping people on like a fake battlefield, like this is not great. And so I had decided to like get out of the reenacting circuit. Like I was done with it, and then I got a job doing it. So,
but not a job as reenacting as a native person.
No. So I started working as a fur trader, and it was on an Ojibwe reservation. So like I did a lot of native things there. Like I built wigwams and canoes and talked to people about indigenous history, but it was not never presenting myself as indigenous. But that's one of the things so that's where my interest in 18th century music kind of came from, was from portraying a fur trader in the 1790s and trying to come up with his repertoire of tunes.
Right.
But it's just weird, man. Like, part of the reason I was quite so celebratory last night is I kind of accepted a tentative job offer, and I'm just realizing, so the guy that I portray, the piper that worked for the Northwest Company at Grand Portage, was named George Mackay. Yeah. And he, his whole gig was he was supposed to play pipes at Grand Portage on Lake Superior for the summer rendezvous, kind of the summer get together of all these fur traders and the resupply session. And then when they found out that I'd been
kind of imagining him playing like as they like cleaned the pelts after they came in after a day's work, kind of thing. Not so much as like a gathering. That makes sense though.
Well, he wound up doing that too. Like,
okay.
The funny thing about George is that so we only have any account of his life from Hudson's Bay Company records and a couple Northwesters. So there's these two main fur trading companies, the Northwest Company and the Hudson's Bay Company, along the Canadian border. Then there's some American ones too, but they are really insignificant at this in that 1790s period. They kind of come and go and don't make nearly the money that the British companies are making. Anyway, so the Hudson's Bay Company was way better about record keeping. The Northwest Company like actively destroyed their records a number of times to keep them out of Hudson's Bay Company hands. So we don't have a ton of information from Northwesters. But there's a couple Hudson's Bay Company posts that were established seemingly purely to spy on Northwest Company stuff.
Really?
And kind of... some of it is like having a Burger King and a McDonald's side by side for competition, and some of it is I'm here to spy and figure out what's going on. But we get an account of George Mackay's life from another Mackay working for the Hudson's Bay Company rather than the Northwest Company like George did. But he mentioned that I think in the journal entry it's something like the two Mr. Mackays stayed last night and gave us a wonderful concert on the bagpipes. And then the next day he mentions that George Mackay is considered the first piper in Scotland, and he was hired by
spelled F-U-R-S-T, perhaps?
No, F-I-R-S-T.
Darn
I
it.
think
missed opportunity.
Oh, furs.
Were puns not a thing yet?
Oh, they totally were. The Hudson's Bay Company motto was "We risk our skins for furs." or something like that.
Very nice. Marketing so at work, even in the 18th century. I like it.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. It was something like that anyway. It was in Latin, so I'm sure I can get some. I can pretend like it's just my translation or something. Anyway, but he mentions, it's funny because like George Mackay is describing himself this way, right? Like, oh, I'm the first piper in Scotland. But he was offered £50 a year to play pipes for the rendezvous and then like to be transported back to Scotland. But when he got to Grand Portage and people found out that he could read, write, and do math, they made him on a fur post too.
Very
so
useful.
He signed a contract for 7 years. But it's weird and it's kind of wild to me. Like, he lived where he played pipes, or where he spent the winter, is like it's like 10 miles from where I'm moving,
Really?
like right on the same river, like, and
Yeah.
the nearest town today is the place that I'm moving to, which is, it's kind of cool to be like, oh, I'm following in George Mackay's footsteps again. This is neat.
There's a part of me that wants to start delving into theories of reincarnation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely, I don't know. It's cool. It's really cool. I mean, it's also the place where the Red River is a magical place, man. Like, it's also where my dissertation is about. Like, so the two-spirit person that I center all of my research on lived in the Red River. Kind of the best details of her life come from the Red River. Also, the like one of the most famous people that I think was probably a trans man, but is kind of thought of as just a woman dressing as a man and living as a man and being discovered. But there's a woman from the Orkneys, I suppose you might say. She lived the rest of her life as a woman when she got discovered, but she worked for the Hudson's Bay Company for like 2 years, doing all of that like heavy labor of rowing boats and stuff like that, and eventually wound up giving birth right in the Red River too. So it's like everything
In the river?
along the river. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not in the river. But yeah, in the fur post, that's going to be again about an hour from where we're moving. Just
And that famous song, the Red River Valley, that is referring to the valley around that Red River, right? This is
I have no idea.
North Dakota into Minnesota.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a Red River in Texas, I think, too, and Oklahoma that kind of confuses me. Maybe Kansas. I can't remember. But there's definitely more than one Red River in the world.
Right. Maybe that song is about one of the others. I'm not sure. My dad grew up in South Dakota, and so I feel like semi familiar with some of the geography up there. We used to go up into South Dakota every summer, but certainly not like, I don't live there, so I don't feel like super duper sure of It's all kind of vague in my mind. So.
Yeah.
Oh well. Now let me just give a hard tug here to pull us over to talk about border pipes. So we've got some featured on the album. We heard a set playing that minuet there just now, and you mentioned that like the set that you're getting. There's something special about the chanters, not only the two chanters, but I feel like I've heard you talk before about how like it seems that in the past border pipes were set up more to push the range a little more, and maybe today a lot of modern border pipes are more like just mini Highland bagpipes.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think like that's how they like the popularity of Highland pipes is hard to understate,
Yeah.
Like there's more Highland pipers now than there ever have been. Obviously, that's not a big statement. There's more people on the planet, but like, it's interesting to me that almost certainly in the 18th century there were more lowland pipers, or people playing the instrument that we might call border pipes, than there were Highland pipers.
Like today, you say the word bagpipes, people think Highland pipes immediately,
right.
But that wouldn't have been the case previously.
No, and yeah, and yeah, so they're so I think that Highland piping repertoire and style kind of won out, that wins the choice. And for pipe makers that are trying to make a living making their instruments, you kind of wind up adjusting to what people want. And so if you're making a set of pipes that can pinch up easily to the second octave, so you get like an octave and a half, then like that's not a benefit. That's not a good thing for somebody that is a Highland piper that goes in and starts playing, because you've got to be a little bit more delicate. We're kind of used to setting up our Highland pipes so that they sound optimal at like the most, like the high pressure volume, right? Where and a consistent pressure all the way through, and that pressure is going to be pretty hard. And if you go into border piping that way, you're going to wind up kind of squealing into the second octave pretty regularly on your B's and your C's, if that's how you set up the instrument. So over time, my understanding of it is just the way that pipe makers were making the chanters and making the reeds kind of shifted more to cater to people going in with that Highland piping style. And at this point, we're like 1 or 2 generations in of people that are learning from people that made that switch. I think that's sort of how it works.
That seems to make sense.
I'm hoping to do some interviews with pipe makers shortly here and kind of see if my understanding of that chronology is right.
Yeah. Well, one can imagine, Highland pipers going, I want something a little bit quieter. I want something I can play in the kitchen. Oh, you make border pipes, make me some. Hey, these squeak too much. And then the border pipe maker going, these Highland pipers. All right, fine. Yeah, I'll make you a tiny Highland pipe. And then, a generation later, it's like, that's just what it is.
Right. Well, and it's also like, it comes down to just reed too. I think it's mostly about reed making, but it might not be like the pipes that I'm using on this album are Nate Banton border pipes with a reed made by Will Woodson. And Nate doesn't make his stuff to go up. Like that's not how he makes his chanters anymore. And so yeah, I'm not sure if we talked about this already, but I asked, I think when I started playing, I realized I could get a high B, and I sent a message to Will Woodson saying, hey, I've been getting a high B pretty reliably here. Is there like a different fingering I should be using to get high C, or is there a way to do that? And Will just said, it's not even supposed to be able to play high B.
Right,
really.
that's
so,
right. Yeah.
The amount of pressure you'd have to put in order to get a high C would be hard to muster.
Yeah.
But I did do it. I did manage to squeeze a high C out of there, but it's sort of like, I got high C's out of it as like a crossing note or as a grace note, but not really a sustained melody note.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes to another of your episodes where you just talk about the experience of playing high Bs on Highland pipes. Just because I think it's really exciting, and I know that it's new to me. I know it's not new to everyone, but I want all my friends to know about it, so it's exciting to have more notes to work with, so.
Well, it's been fun. I love every time you post a video of like, here's another high B.
I'm getting there, man. I'm going to master it someday. I've got big plans.
But it's weird how much, like, I don't know. I feel like this might be the moment where it sticks, but, this isn't new.
Right.
People used to play high Bs pretty regularly. And then, that went away as being like a regular thing. But again, Barry Shears points out, like, I think most of the chanters that exist that have the crease in the back,
right, little notch back there.
I think a lot of those come from Nova Scotia, where people were using that method to kind of pinch up to high B. But I don't know. It's funny, like when it first clicked for me, I felt like I was inventing a new thing, or something like that. Even though like it was pointed out to me that it was possible and how to do it, it still felt like, oh my god, this is this amazing thing.
Right.
And wanted everybody to know about it and try it out. And then every so often, like Mike McNitch, who is I'm not sure, he's a really good piper and used to work as a pipe maker. I'm not sure if he still makes pipes or not, but he, for years apparently, like touring around, he would, like, part of his sets would be talking about high Bs, trying to get people to play high Bs, like on gigs in Scotland, and it just doesn't go anywhere. People aren't interested in that.
Yeah.
But the way the internet works now, maybe.
Yep. That's the thing. I have seen, I again, maybe it's just that I haven't been looking in the right places, but I feel like just over the course of the last year, that recently, I've seen it popping up on Instagram.
Yeah.
Seemingly organically. Like, I'm not going looking for it. I see somebody going, hey, look, I just figured out how to play high B. And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea who this person is. And so, awesome.
Yeah, I messaged, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same person, but you messaged me her video on Instagram, and then I
Jenna Bagpipes,
Yeah. And it was wild, though. Like, we just messaged. It's like, what got you excited about, or how'd you start doing this or something?
Right.
And it was, I think she came to it from Barry, like, some stuff that Barry Shears.
Oh, she's Canadian. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, she's in Montreal, and so like she knew it was possible.
Of course, because of course only people in Canada can know about Barry Shears.
right.
Yeah, there's me making a connection that doesn't need to be made.
But yeah, it was really cool to see that she was doing it. But I don't know. I was hoping that was honestly I was hoping to get a sponsorship or something from McCallum to like make a chanter that specifically worked for it. Like more than a chanter, a reed and chanter combo, because it's every time it's sort of a nightmare to like source a reed that works well in this hardy chanter that can sound good and also pinch up and also be kind of around B flat for everything I want it to do.
Right, you're kind of Frankenstein's monster in your setup there, aren't you?
Yeah, maybe maybe a little bit, but so I don't know. We'll see. Everybody I asked either didn't respond, or McCallum at least was kind enough to be like, no. But McCallum is the only one where I actually had their email from other correspondence I'd had with him. Everybody else I just used their entry
their contact us
and,
thing. Yeah.
I was hoping I could get Hardy interested, since I'm using a Hardy chanter now to do it, but they didn't respond. And the Elevation chanter guy too, I thought maybe, but again, he might just be busy with his move too.
That's right, he's doing that move. Well, I was going to save John Charles' Fireproof Pipes for the very last track, but I feel like it feels really natural to play it right now, since you got some out of range notes in there, and so it's a really great example of like what's possible with this,
Yeah, and it's also fitting for the discussion. So the Fireproof Pipes are the border pipes that I was borrowing. So John Charles, poor guy, like had a house fire, and like he and his family were fine, but it was a house fire, pretty bad one. But somehow these pipes survived.
Is it funny that like fire. Hopefully we're all nice and like thinking the right things, that all of us would say, oh no, is his family okay? But then the next question would be like, what about his bagpipes?
Right. What about those pipes though? But yeah, his pipes survived. There was like some smoke damage maybe, but I couldn't see any of that. Like, they smell good, they play good.
I was gonna ask, do they smell smoky when you blow, does a little smoke come out the drone ends?
right but yeah, he was a podcast listener, and I was starting to play a lot of William Dixon tunes on Highland pipes, and I was like dabbling with the idea of getting a set of border pipes, but I was a grad student and pretty broke, and kind of thinking about getting I didn't want to get a set of pipes. Like, all of the mildly affordable set of pipes weren't that I knew of at the time. You couldn't play up to B and C easily that I knew of. So I didn't want to spend a bunch of money and then find out I couldn't do it. And to be honest, I didn't really care for the sound of border pipes when I was thinking about getting a set.
I can relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can be kind of harsh, right?
Yeah. There's a shrillness to them that I did not love at first. And I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on an instrument because I wanted to have the instrument because the history of pipers in the borders, or in the border region, is really interesting, about like the town piper and what their role was, and that was the instrument they used, and it was a thing that I wanted to have to play that repertoire on that set of pipes, but it wasn't an instrument that I looked forward to listening to over and over and over again, But anyway, so as I was kind of hemming and hawing about this, on microphone for the podcast,
right, thinking about maybe selling a kidney to get the money together, that kind of stuff.
Man, I had that's a digression, but have you ever tried to cancel a subscription? And like one of those things where you have to call in and somebody tries to bully you into selling parts of your body in order to keep it. Like, I tried to cancel an Xbox Live account when I was in college, and the guy was like, I don't know, have you thought about donating blood? Seems pretty stupid to get rid of your Xbox Live account. I'm like, dude, I don't even play video games anymore.
Could you harvest some of your own biomass?
Right. Anyway, so John Charles is like, hey man, I have this set of border pipes that I'm not playing because I currently live in an apartment and they're a little too loud for that, and I won't be able to play them for like a year. Do you want to borrow them? And I was just like blown away.
Right.
No, I guess. I don't know that anybody's been that generous to me, so no is my default answer.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that, and he sent them to me, and they're amazing. I fell in love with them. They were. So that meant that I tried to be sure to be playing a Dixon tune on like every episode of the podcast while I had these pipes for a short period of time, and it was really cool. I wanted to just drive them back and like give them to John Charles, and so the last couple days that I had them, I started playing a lot on them and kind of really falling in love with them and figuring out how to get up to high C and stuff like that. And and this tune, John Charles's Fireproof Pipes, just like. That was a tune I was playing on the border pipes a lot, and And I wanted to like give him something, you know, like here's a tune, and it's, you know, it's a thank you tune and all that. Ironically, I made a recording of it that I planned to use on the album, and then like I recorded kind of 2 or 3 different versions of it. Then I gave the pipes back,
Right.
and then I realized the good recording I had, the best recording I had, left out my favorite parts of the tune.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, I got to revisit this. But I don't have those pipes anymore. So it's a
Yeah.
so it's a tribute to a set of border pipes, but played on Highland pipes. But it does, you know, that was when my pipe chanter could like do all the things that border pipes can do really well, of like getting the C and F naturals and getting up to high B and high C. And even high D kind of sort of as a grace note, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I do the high D in
It's
there.
so far up there, man. So people should get the album, and there will be links for where they can get it, and there are more tracks that feature border pipes.
Yeah.
I would like, if the version we play, I'd love to play that Highland pipe version, just because it's got all the parts in it. If that sounds like a good idea to you. And then, if you don't mind me taking us on another just 90-degree turn, since we're talking about pipes, it's not only border pipes that we're hearing on here. We also hear some uilleann pipes, of course. We heard that in Mr. Preston's horn pipe opening up there. And you also have some uilleann pipes coming up in this track 9, Miss Fowler's Delight, followed by, is it pronounced the nabob?
I think it's the nabob. In my
the
head,
nabob.
that's how I always say it.
And then we got Pantheon and the Oak Tree. That tune when the nabob takes over, especially when it goes into that second part. Man, I love that. I love that. About that I love so much. Is it in the melody or the tempo, or is it in the instrument and what the instrument can do? You know, you got accidentals, you got more range, you got staccato. What do you love about uilleann pipes?
I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Like the tone of them. I really.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how important the tone was to me until I saw somebody complaining about the tone of uilleann pipes. I was like, they're nuts. Like that's
right?
the best part, man. Is sort of the tone of them, and that like that honking, that growling kind of low D, that bark is so satisfying. The possibilities are really nice. The fact that they are challenging is kind of satisfying about them. Like there's a sense of accomplishment, and like I maybe had this with Highland pipes years ago, but I haven't. At this stage in like my Highland piping, if a thing is too hard, I just don't do it anymore. It's like not worth the. Like I'm pretty good at Highland piping, and so most of the stuff that I'm looking at for like 18th century tunes don't present much of a challenge. Like it's pretty satisfying to like play a tune, and you know sometimes it's tricky to pull it off, and that can be satisfying when you have like a really good take. For me, but with uilleann piping, there's like not only is the melody something new to like learn, but like the way that you're going to approach it, what kind of embellishments you're going to do, because I'm still learning how to do embellishments on uilleann pipes too. Like there's a sense of discovery for them that I don't have anymore with Highland pipes, which I guess is why I got so excited about high B's and high C's and Highland pipes, is it was sort of doing the same thing. I'm like, I can do this? I had no idea.
It's something new after years of kind of not having a ton new. That, like, of course, one should always have the attitude of I'm always learning, right? But you know, you kind of hit the bottom of the barrel, and you can improve on the things you've already learned, but it's not the same as learning new things. If you know,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the ability to craft a more complicated piece of music with pipes, and especially lately I've been playing regulators more. Regulators are really hard to record, especially with my setup right now, because my chanter is quite a bit softer than the chanter that I got with the set of pipes that I play. So like my regulators aren't particularly well balanced anyway, but the one regulator that works the best is the loudest one, and it pretty much always blows out the mic level.
It's all you can hear.
Recording. Yeah, and so it's hard to make it sound musical. And I try to like I've allowed it to not be perfect for the sake of the podcast, but for recording an album, it's sort of trickier to feel comfortable doing that. But it's reassuring to listen back and realizing that this is not a new problem. Like you listen to the old Black Cylinders or whatever, like the best Uilleann pipers, right? Like some of those, Seamus Ennis, Willie Clancy, Leroy Elson, like all those guys, when they're playing their regulators, pretty often that's all you hear. Like the regulators overpower the chanter, and it kind of maxes out the recording in a way that is not pleasing to the ear. But it's sort of like, well, no, that's it. Like you feel like you're really just listening to the music rather than a highly polished thing,
Though if you want a highly polished thing, you gotta ask that Patrick D'Arcy what his sound guy did to capture, because that Wallop the Spot album that he has, that I only discovered thanks to you. Like he's a great piper, of course, but part of the thing is like, what how many microphones did the sound guy have on this set of pipes? It
seems like it's sort of normal to have two, like to have a mic for the chanter and a mic for the drones and regs. But I don't. I tried that, but I don't have two of a similar enough microphone for that to really work. Like I've got a compressor and a condenser or whatever they're called. So I think that didn't really work.
The mechanics of the regulators, is it basically like if you've got a drone, like your typical Highland drone, the full length of it is going to play a D or an A or whatever it's supposed to play. Right. And then the regulator is a lever that when you push down on it, it opens a hole further up the drone. And so then the sound is coming out, on a shorter distance. And so it's making a higher sound. Is that the mechanics of how it works?
No, that would be, that would work.
But you'd lose that low sound, huh?
It's way worse than that. It's so much worse than that, James. Because like the regulators are basically three more chanters, because they use a double reed rather than a single reed.
Oh, do they? I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So their default. So when you're playing a full set, like the regulators are off basically until you hit the key, and then
that turns them on.
Yeah, that's the only thing that'll let the note out. But since it's double reeds again, it's just like, how much more time do we spend messing with a double reed than we do with our drone reeds?
Right.
Like it's
it's got to make pressure
fickle...
nutsy too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so getting your regulators set up and getting them comfortable in the environment, and like your chanter reed is going to change pretty quickly from like the surrounding environment because you're playing it constantly, but your regulators only play, unless you're playing them a ton, you're going to be hitting them fairly sparingly, so they're going to change slower than the chanter does. So as your chanter is kind of flattening out or whatever, your regulators are staying sharp and not adjusting as fast, or vice versa. I still have I can never remember. I had to write on my tuner, push in to flat or to sharpen or something like that, because I can just never. It doesn't.
This
really,
is the black magic of drone mastery or reed mastery, right? Just trust the wizards in the ivory tower. Take your pipes before them when you need help. That's pretty cool. I mean, I love the sound.
It's tricky.
I've watched a lot of uilleann pipers playing, and it's like watching the heel of their hand, rhythmically hit or push down and stuff. But yeah, that's I never knew that. That is interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's funny because it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're first coming to uilleann pipes. You want regulators so bad because you see everybody do them.
It's such a robust sound.
Yeah, that chord accompaniment, all that stuff is so cool that you want it, and then you get it, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done this to myself. Like, because you almost always get them before you should.
Yeah.
And then, like, I kind of wish I had not gotten a full set either, because like a three regulators is a beast to figure your hand around. I kind of like the thing about, if you have one regulator, I don't think they're that hard, because you don't have to be terribly precise in your hand placement.
Oh, sure, you can smash it down and you're going to hit it.
Yeah.
And not hit other things.
Right. And then two regulators, which is sort of the norm for a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of very good uilleann pipers that use a 3/4 set. And there too, it's pretty easy to like choose one key at a time. But when you got three, it's like, there's always, it's really hard to like hit a single key unless you're playing on the bass, the one that's closest to your hand.
Right.
It's a little tricky.
I've got to think that like this is just like accelerated road to carpal tunnel and like cysts in your wrist and all kinds of problems. Just watching people like keep your fingers where they are to play on the chanter, and then doing this like lateral movement with your wrist to use your wrist almost like a dexterous digit of its own, you know.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that. Oh God. Like, do you have nightmares about hand problems?
Always. Like, oh man,
yeah.
I talked to Camille about this too. That like I feel bad about this because I don't want to cheapen the suffering of people who the challenge that people who like lose their legs, for example, have to go through. But I've done the calculations in my head, and I'm like, my functional hands are about the last thing I would want to give up. Like, I'd give up a lot of other bodily functions before I would give up functional hands. And I have so many friends who suffer from focal dystonia as well, where they've got all the digits, but the digits won't do what their brain want them to.
Oh man.
And it's the stuff of nightmares for sure. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. For a while when I was younger, I had this idea that I should cut my left pinky off, like as an offering, like to make sure, like I'll lose this one now,
right?
And that'll mean I'm good. Like if I
leave me with the 9 I really need,
right? Like, and I didn't, thankfully, because that would have been absurd. But also now I need it for keys.
Now you need it. That's funny too, though, because see, when I was a kid, both my maternal and paternal grandpas, they were both missing one finger from different work accidents. And when I was small, I thought that to become a grandpa, you had to give up a finger. And I did think about which one I would give up. And, I was disabused of that idea before I started piping. But had that remained true, of course, it would have been my left pinky.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's funny.
Well, let me pull you over to another tune that also features uilleannpipes. This one also pulls in some whistle. And last time we talked a little bit about, like, if you had to pick an instrument and you couldn't play any of the rest of them. And it seems to me, if I remember right, you thought maybe whistle would be the choice. Do you feel like that still holds true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I don't know.
Of course, it's an impossible thing to answer, right? It might change day to day and stuff too.
Right. I really like the convenience of a whistle. There's something charming about. Oh man, I was gonna look this up, and I forgot to. But like, there's. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll cut out silence too. And I can also vamp for just a sec. I can tell you what we're going to listen to is track 11 on the album. It's got Green Sleeves, which is nice because it's a familiar tune, so anybody listening will probably recognize that. Then it's got a tune called Strip Me Naked. And anything called Strip Me Naked, I doubt I could be unhappy with it, no matter what it sounded like, just because it's a delightful title. It's not the only delightful title on this album either. I think one of them, you got the C word in one of your titles here.
Yeah.
That's always fun. I remember in one of your podcast episodes, I can't remember now if it was season 4 or season 5, you did a tune that you did a little translation work on it, and like the translated title was something like, was it Shit James?
Yeah.
And I immediately thought, I've been using this Nomer of Piping Jim as like my bagpipe, like my email signature for customers and stuff. I'm like, very tempting. There's historical precedent to change this to Shitty James instead.
Yeah, it was an anti-royal, I think it was an anti-royal tune. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, we'll listen to this tune here, and after it kind of plays out, I'll cut out any of this, that's messy. And after it cuts out, as it kind of as we fade out of that tune, then you tell me what you're looking up.
is. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen this documentary. Like, there's a couple times where Paddy Maloney will be on a TV show, and one of the performers from the Dubliners, I think John Sheehan is his name. That's what I was trying to look up. I think John Sheehan, and they just like they both just kind of look at each other and just pop their whistles out of their pockets, like they're just carrying around a whistle in their pocket, and then they start playing a tune together. And that's a thing you can't do with bagpipes, really.
Very true.
That makes whistles pretty attractive. The other thing is, as much as I say I like uilleann piping because of the challenge, I hate uilleann piping because of the challenge.
Sure, yeah.
It's really nice to just be able to have an instrument that I can just confidently know, like, I'm just going to play this tune quick and not have to think about it too hard. And especially when you're learning, when you want to learn a melody, sing it is great. But for me, it's like play it on whistle a bunch and then figure it out. And even for, I don't know, I haven't had a good practice chanter and reed combo in years. So even at this point, I'm starting to favor my whistle over my practice chanter.
Yeah, I got a little while ago, I got one of those penny whistles that, I don't know if they're still being manufactured, but they were made with like Piper's fingering on them,
sure.
A full, what would it be, 7 holes in front and 1 in the back.
Yeah.
And it was fine, but like I'd already been playing whistle for a little while, so pretty quickly it felt like, I'll just play the normal whistle.
Right.
But I have been thinking about it with regard to my kids. I got my 2 oldest practice chanters, and I'm kind of using them as guinea pigs to like try to figure out a good way to teach little kids how to play practice chanters.
That's cool.
But I am also starting to think like maybe I should just get them whistles, and maybe that's the way to start them. It might be more intuitive for a kid, and it might be less frustrating. I don't know.
It's so much louder though.
That's true. More painful for me and my wife, that's for sure.
Because the one thing a whistle does really well is play a super loud note you didn't intend it to. And when you're a kid and you figure out that you've unlocked a new ability, like
right, you don't even put your fingers on the holes, right? You just hold it up to your mouth and blow as hard as you can.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
that's a good point. Check the enthusiasm just a little bit. But speaking of whistles, let's roll into another track, track 2, which is Larks in the Morning and a Gold Ring. Aside from, I won't bore you with all the Lord of the Rings imagery that plays through my head just because of the title.
It took me a long time to figure out why you're excited about the Gold Ring. Like an embarrassingly long amount of time. It's like, because of the Hobbit and Lord of the
I wear my few passions on my sleeve. I sure do, and it's hard for me to not talk about them.
I guess I'll do a plug here for your Patreon account, because it's weird because I've gotten to hear all this stuff that people haven't yet. But yeah, your descriptions of tunes to Timothy was awesome. All this Lord of the Rings stuff. So join Droning
awesome.
on Patreon and get early access. It's great.
Yeah, thanks for that, man. Join Patreon, folks, and help me out. But yeah, I felt very self-conscious about that. Both like, am I wasting Tim's time right now? And then also in the editing process, like, am I wasting everybody's time? But I try to lean on like authenticity. Like if I really feel it, then I'll really say it. And if it's authentic, then it's okay.
I think, honestly, when you sent me the video of your daughter dancing to Mr. Preston's hornpipe, like, I don't know if you have this as a podcaster too, but like, you wonder how people consume the stuff that we make, right? Like,
is it going into the ether?
Yeah. Like, how is this, like, am I somebody's commute? Am I somebody's dishes? And just, I kind of, so like seeing like, this is bringing this girl so much joy that she's just spinning wildly.
Yeah.
I love it. That's great. That's so great to hear. And I think, when you were describing the visions that you were getting, thinking about the music and the birds, it was great. It was really cool to hear.
Well, thanks. That's encouraging. I appreciate it. whistle discussion, and having heard Larks in the Morning and a Gold Ring, I want to know, do you have a pitch that if you were going to talk to any piper and it was like, maybe I shouldn't be so interested in this, but I'm excited by the idea of like multi-instrumentalism, and it seems like a very natural fit for a piper to pick up a whistle. And so like, how would you pitch it to any piper? They're like, I only play bagpipes. Yeah. Should I get a whistle? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, because the reality is that a lot of Highland pipers want to play other instruments, and their default is to get something that is exactly the same as Highland pipes, which is why border pipes are the way they are, which is why small pipes are the way they are. And that's fine. You're playing another instrument. There's different challenges and things to learn, but like whistle is actually different. Like it's similar enough where you don't have to relearn something completely, but it is different. And I think it will help you playing an instrument that is noticeably different from your main instrument has got to help you realize the possibilities of your primary instrument too, right? Like the reason we bend notes on Highland pipes is because of a piper being jealous of a fiddle or something, right? Like
totally makes sense. Yes.
Like, I want to be able to do that too. Oh, I can do that. Yeah. And the whistle does the same thing, right? Like you realize that vibrato is something that you can do on Highland pipes when you play on whistle more and realize like how effective that can be. And I don't know. I mean, it's all horribly bad habit stuff that if you're really into competition and can't disconnect the two things, that can be bad. But I'm a big fan of not competing, so like, I'm not
that was another thing on the chat last night. And like I totally agree with the line of thinking, like let's stop beating the musicality out of the music, And of course there's value to each thing and stuff, but when you brought up on that chat last night, when you said something about like now I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was to that too, and it was like competition potentially ruining music, even though it maybe preserved it in some way, and like kind of it led into the discussion of like how these older collections of tunes, like it was what's written down is only one way it might have been played. It would be played a bunch of different ways, and I just kind of laughed and like, yeah, Jeremy would say something about competition ruining music,
Oh man, I don't remember a lot of things I said last night.
It wasn't like harsh or anything at all,
Yeah, I remember saying something about doing it different, and the guy that teaches bagpipe performance at Carnegie Mellon was the one that said, well, yeah, but don't do that if you're gonna compete. You can't do that.
Well, again, different strokes for different folks, right? Different focuses, right?
It's something that really frustrated me even before I started doing the podcast, was how, like, if you wanted to change it, everybody that wants to change how Highland piping works, you have to first win all the medals, and then people will listen to you. Like, that's the case with Alan McDonald. That's the case with Barnaby Brown, like Matthew Welch. Even like you don't get to, your opinion doesn't matter unless you've already won in the restrictive system that we're all kind of living through if you want to compete.
I felt a little bit that way when some of Fred Morrison's tunes started getting through into competition circles. Like, it's like these tunes have always been great. So why did this have to happen, for this additional attention to be focused on them?
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. So whistles, I think, treating bagpipes as a musical instrument rather than a tool for competition and band stuff is, I think, easier if you play other instruments and take those lessons to it. And it's harder if you want to, if you just want to play another instrument so that, you can have a easier to play set of bagpipes, which I think is why a lot of people go to small pipes. But the irony here is that a lot of people that make small pipes are making them for Highland pipers, and they make them way harder than they need to be.
Right.
Way
catering to the players. Yeah.
Right. The first set of small pipes I bought took more energy to play than my Highland pipes, and I was I was so disappointed. Like I wanted a set of pipes that I could play when my cheeks went out, from Highland piping, and then and I didn't think to get a bellow set, and I got a set of Shepherd small pipes. They're like Highland Musette thing, and it was like, oh no, this blows my embouchure out faster, like
even faster. They make them with a smaller blowpipe too, right? So you have to like purse your lips even tighter. Yeah,
smaller blowpipe, and then it was interesting. I traded that set of pipes to a guy for the set of Denny Hall small pipes that I play now, which are way easier to play. but he was tinkering with them and took them apart, and like he drilled a couple extra holes in the like main stock so that air could get to the drone faster. And it was like way less pressure. So it's artificially made, like it's more difficult than it needs to be through these artificial like kind of restrictors. I guess all of it is manufactured and artificial. It's a weird way to put it, but yeah. Anyway, so
what you mean is clear. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. The first set of small pipes I ever had, I actually altered to make them harder because I was coming off of Highland pipes, and I was like, I keep blowing these reeds out, and so I extended some tubes and made the reeds harder and stuff to make it so I could just keep playing at my Highland pressure.
Huh. Yeah, it's weird. So weird.
That was years ago. I've since seen the light, but that was.
Well, it's like one of the I don't listen to I don't listen to Piper Dojo terribly
Andrew Douglas,
often. But when I do, I'll like go in fits and starts. For whatever reason, like it just doesn't get served up to me on my podcast app or whatever. I'm listening to too much other stuff and I miss it. But one of the things I really have enjoyed when he does these long form conversations, he did a couple of those last year, and like there's a big part of it that is this idea that you have to play a hard reed to get good tone or to be a good piper. If your reed, if somebody comes and plays your pipes and they can do it easily, that somehow reflects poorly on you. Like it's got to be hard, like this weird masculinity thing attached to it. And like, no, you can make good music with a easier reed. It's not required to be busting your gut to do it. But
that was made really clear to me a few years ago. Speaking of reenacting, there's a sort of like 4th of July time semi reenactment like fair kind of thing that happens at a park that's just a half block from my house every year. And a friend of mine and I went and played pipes there, kind of as a side attraction, and I was just busting my guts. I hadn't been playing for a while, and I had a new reed in, and it was just killing me. And we were taking turns doing solos, and I was dying, and so he was like, play on my pipes. And this friend of mine, Zach, who I've mentioned before, who passed away a little while ago, he easily the best piper I've ever known personally, competing in grade 1 and stuff, just really, really good. I blew up his pipes, and it was like playing a practice chanter. It was just smooth as butter, like so easy. And I had to back way off, so it took some adjustment, but it felt so easy. And that was when I was like, if a piper who's this good has his own setup to be like this, then why am I, giving myself a hernia,
Right.
And like to some degree, it does require a skill set, right? Because then it's delicate. So if you blow too hard, it's harder to keep it steady. But you can develop that skill set, and it opens up sort of like more freedom for quicker fingers and for maybe more mental freedom too, just to think about your music instead of surviving.
Right. Well, I mean, so much of it is like you play better if you're more relaxed, right? Like if you're not death gripping your chanter, and if you're not, having to, burst blood vessels in your arm to pull the thing down. But yeah.
Well, I don't mean to just make you muse on non-pipe stuff, but it's related to. I'm thinking like we're probably reaching a decent episode length here, especially once I cut in the tunes themselves. So I'm thinking maybe we could go out on track 18, Little Bower, which had. Oh wait, now I suddenly can't remember. Is it singing only with drones, or does the border pipe chanter come in as well?
It comes in afterwards, yeah.
It does come in afterwards.
I sing the song and then play it on chanter too.
And you've done this before. I remember in an episode, one of your podcast episodes, you sang the words for I think it was a Pembroke, wasn't it?
Macintosh's Lament.
Yeah. That changed that tune for me. Hearing not only it's not the same to just read the lyrics, like hearing it sung and then going into the pipe music, it changed it. And so I wonder if I could get you to, pontificate a little bit more about why does it matter to sing pipe tunes? If there are lyrics, do the lyrics matter? Because it also occurs to me, you mentioned in another episode, there was that tune, the goats, the night we had the goats. Like my sister-in-law brought this up just a little while ago. I watched a little concert that was happening. Oh, I can't remember now where exactly it was, but it was a small piper and an uilleann piper and I think a fiddler / flautist. And my sister-in-law had watched it as well, and she texted me afterward, and she was like, there was this one tune that was just beautiful, and it was like putting me in the mind of like, Ireland and like just like lovely images. It was so pretty. And then they said what it was about. It was about a cat trying to decide if it was going to go in or out of the back door. And it was like, if I'd heard those words in Gaelic, I would have thought that they were like some deep, beautiful wisdom. But knowing the translation ruins the song. And so, like, what is it? Does it matter? Is it always good? Is it sometimes bad? Tell me about like why it matters to sing pipe tunes.
Yeah, I think so. With Macintosh's Lament, that really helped to understand, that it's a lament, and how it works. And that tune in particular is a keening tune, right? So it's like it's one of the older pibrochs probably, and is kind of part of this funeral tradition of like having people kind of wail and sing these laments at the graveside. And for me, like, I kind of had the same experience that your sister-in-law had of like hearing somebody sing in Gaelic just always sounds mystical and magical. And sometimes the funny, I mean, it's kind of great that it's about a cat coming and going, right? Like,
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to the sense of humor that people have too, right? Which is nice. But the lament, yeah, that Macintosh's Lament tune hits hard, like
It does,
actual.
yeah.
It was sort of the hardest cut that I made on the next album. Was like, I got to cut this out. It's too long, and it's a lot of. It's then I go into like just playing it as a pibroch, and yeah, my wife recommended. She really liked Mr. Preston's hornpipe, which is why it became track 1. And she really didn't like listening to Macintosh's Lament, which is why it got cut. Yeah,
Wow,
she likes my singing okay, but she's like, this is pretty sad and long. I don't know. It's like, yeah,
maybe as a single, huh? Maybe release.
Maybe
as a single.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think it's good to know the whole story, right? Like it's okay. It's okay not to, like your sister-in-law's not wrong. Where like, well, knowing the story can sometimes ruin it.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to kind of know everything that's going on, and for me anyway, like I want to know what I'm playing and what it's about and how it works, and
yeah,
I'm excited by there's a lot of people that are kind of working on Gaelic, on like learning Scots Gaelic that I interact with now and like singing Scots Gaelic and are doing stuff like that. But it's not a language I have, and it was a language that was really important to me to learn. It felt like I felt weird in college because I was spending all this time learning like an endangered language that I had no relationship to other than being in love with the language. So as I was doing that in college, I was like, okay, so I'm going to learn Ojibwe and then I'm going to learn Gaelic. Like that'll be next step, is to like learn this other endangered language that I should be invested in its survival. And then I found out that like whatever genealogy, your ancestors and all that sort of is a mixed bag of like, this doesn't really matter. Like I'm not Scottish. I'm an American that happens to have an eensy little bit of Scottish ancestry. But I realized that like my Scottish ancestry were Scots, like not Gaels. Like they would have spoke Scots and not Gaelic. So my motivation to like, I'm going to go to Sabalmor Osteg and, learn Gaelic kind of went away. But mostly, anyway, so singing Macintosh's Lament, it was important to me to like sing it in English rather than try to figure out how to sing it in Gaelic, and because it means more to me to know what those words are.
And to me as well, because that's my native language as well. And so like, I'm sure if you'd sung it in Gaelic, it would have been beautiful. But the thing that happened in me that changed that tune for me going forward wouldn't have happened if I hadn't understood the lyrics. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's also really interesting to me. I don't know where you stand on pibroch, James. It seems like sometimes you talk about it as the dumbest thing ever, and sometimes it seems like you maybe are coming around to liking it. And
yes, I just want to be totally honest that like, because I feel like some people are very hipster about it. They're like, oh, I love pibroch. Pibroch is the best thing in the world, and I'm like, okay, no, that it's boring. Don't try to, but some people talk about it and it's like, no, I can tell that this person really does love it and they understand the form, And so I just want to be totally honest. Like, I do feel like I've been converted to it and I do love it. I still don't understand it well, but I want to be totally honest. I used to have no use for it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. The interesting thing to me about the song version of Macintosh's Lament is the song is like the third variation, like the melody that you're singing is actually it's like the third variation of the pibroch, so it's not even the ground, which is where I would have assumed the melody or the song would be, is in the ground, but it's kind of interesting that it's the third variation to me. It was all have we talked about that, how that was like my favorite tune, like in my childhood,
No, don't
My
think
favorite.
so.
My favorite tune was Androch Big, and I didn't realize it was a pibroch. And when I started playing it
No.
by
Oh, that's
ear,
right. Yeah.
somebody was like, "Oh yeah, that's a cool tune. You're playing pibroch." I'm like, "No, pibroch's dumb. It's boring.
Yeah.
This awesome song from Brother." Yeah, we talked about this about Brother.
You did
Yeah.
mention it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I haven't had the same experience. I wish that I'd had a pibroch embedded in me somewhere and then was able to rediscover it, but no. Sometimes it's taken work. But honestly, like when I was like a preteen, my dad was really into reggae, and I didn't love reggae. Like he was into it enough that he'd taken a semester off school and gone to Jamaica for a music festival and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
And as I was transitioning from preteen to teenage years, like I wanted to like the music that my dad liked. Maybe because of our rocky, maybe our relationship was rocky otherwise, so I wanted to have something
Sure.
in common, you know. But I remember like making myself listen to reggae like it was work, you know.
Sure.
And it eventually clicked, and today it's certain like I mean it's one of my very favorite genres of music, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm experiencing the same sort of process with pibroch. Like I want to like it, and so I am going to listen to it and read about it, and especially hearing it sung and hearing it with orchestration backing it up, things like that help me a lot as like kind of crutches to get into the sort of what you might call the plain vanilla of just a pipe playing.
Have you listened to Alan McDonald's album? It was God, what is it called now? You should check it out. Anyway,
I feel like I've seen some of his stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, he put on an album. Barnaby Brown and him kind of worked on several things, and kind of the goal is to change, or not change, but to kind of honor the older style of playing pibroch. And so he's got this album, which the name escapes me completely right now.
Well, yes, I did just look. Yeah, I've seen a video of his on YouTube where he's got like a choir backing him up doing pibroch.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, I've got him all Googled up right now, so I'll find his album.
Dace Trim or something like that. Anyway, but he sings it. He sings the grounds a lot, and then transitions into piping, and it's a really good way to like hear pibroch a different way and enjoy it. I think, and honestly, you might be at a disadvantage. I mean, the way that I came to pibroch as an adult, when I realized what pibroch was, and that I actually didn't hate it, was sort of getting myself into a compromised state, I guess is how I could describe the amount of whiskey involved. But you know,
my only
really,
option there is like sleep deprivation or something.
Right. So, but that really helped to like really to kind of treat it like a trance. But I think there's a reality where the way that pibroch is performed, I really like competition pibroch, like the way that it's played. I maybe like it more than some of the more historic ways where it was like played a little bit faster. And so I wish that there was a way to do competition style pibroch, but where you could choose the variations you wanted and not have to play the thing from start to finish. Because I don't think people did, you know, when pibroch was at its finest, I don't think that there was it wasn't the norm, or it wasn't required to play every variation, you know, like you kind of it was a list of things to choose from, and maybe you wanted to progress through these movements, like that's definitely potent, you know, like to play everything, but I think it would be just as potent to do like, well, here we'll do the thumb variation and then the tarlua. One of my favorite things to do is to play a tarlua singling and then the crunlua doubling, and like not go through the exhaustion of doing a tarlua singling and doubling and then a crunlua singling and doubling, because those parts are almost always identical except for the embellishment. It's like, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah,
let's just make a crunlua is more,
especially when each is repeated. It's like we're gonna basically do this 4 times, really.
Yeah. You hearing this guy? He's still doing this.
Yeah.
But it's like it's funny, you know, that Timothy that album of, you know, the birds, like the Desperate Battle of the Birds is one of my favorite pibrochs to play, but it's also the one that you will get yelled at for the most because it sounds like you're tuning, like
yes.
it's like there's one of the variations you're just holding a high A basically, and then you drop in the melody notes almost like grace notes between a held high A.
I know exactly the kind of playing you're talking about. I have heard that. Yeah.
But I love it. Like if you're into it, if you're like, if you're feeling it, it is really powerful. And especially like the high notes, that high A note meant something to pipers and to listeners historically. And like one of the things in the intro to William Dixon's book is Matt kind of talking about, I think that's in that book, where he kind of talks about somebody playing the high A a certain way, like that was sort of a rock star note. And in Pibroch you kind of see that, where very rarely do you get a high A in the first ground, like it comes in as a variation later, but you don't have it. So like tunes that use a high A feel more impactful. So like Lament for the Children is this kind of horrifyingly sad tune, and it starts with a high A in it, and it's like, okay, we're in some full on like potency. Like that, this tune is going to be so potent that McCrimmon was like, we're putting a high A right now. Like, I'm too sad to wait. I'm too sad to build to this. This is starting.
Right. It's going to open up there. I love hearing Lament for the Children with that opening when someone's got their chanter set up so they get that scratchy high A.
Yeah. I kind of miss that. Like, I think it's hard to do that and do the high B stuff at the same time. All musically. So that's one thing that I've definitely been like, maybe I should have two chanters going so I can.
Yeah, you just need a couple chanters, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've got them. I just never have more than one going at a time, right?
Right, get them both set up. Yeah. Well, let's go out on Little Bower. Again, this album is excellent. We by no means have exhausted the tracks in this interview. There is a ton more on it, and it's all great. This is also the giveaway for the Patreon folks this month. So everybody who's a patron, I might bend the rules a little bit, Jeremy. If you win the copy of the album, I might do another drawing to see who else could win it instead.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough.
But links to where you can buy it down below, and where you can hop on the Patreon as well if you want to try your luck at winning the copy that I've got here sitting in front of me. Anything else you want to say about Little Bower before we go into it and fade out?
It's a great tune. It's a great collection of music. So the words, this is actually the same place where I got the words from Macintosh's Lament that we talked a lot about. This is a P-Rock episode now, James, sorry.
No.
But yeah, so this is a collection of tunes from, I think, around 1812. And interestingly, the guy who collected these tunes, I think he taught Sir Walter Scott music. Like he was, he had some role in like educating Sir Walter Scott. So there's kind of a big, interesting music collection. But yeah, lovely stuff. He had a lot of tunes from the Borders, and again, because I wanted this album to be more Borders centric, that's why it's in there. But, yeah. Oh, will you walk the wood, lady, or will you walk the lea? Or will ye gae to the little bower and rest a while with me? The dew lies in the wood, Douglas, the wind blows on the lea, and when I gae to a little bower, it shall not be with thee. The stag bells on my hills, lady, the hart but on the hind. My flocks lie in the border dale, my steeds outstrip the wind. A day blast on my bugle horn, 1,000 times the call. Oh, gae with me to a little bower, who can we befall? Do you mind when in that lonely bower we met at eventide? I kissed your young and rosy lips and wooed you for my bride. I saw the blush break on your cheek, the tear stand in your e'e. Oh, could I ween, fair Lady Jane, that then ye would maybe. But say I read that day, and said I yet may do. He thought me on my maiden love, nor yet my rosy hue. He thought me on my bridal bed, ne vow nor tear of mine. He thought about the lands and earth, and how they might be thine. Away, away, ye false man, and mere my bosom ring. There is a bird into yon bower, again ye heard it sing. Red grew the Douglas dusky cheek, he turned his eye away. A golden hilt fell to his hand. What can the wee bird say? It hurtled on the bough and sang, "Oh, ways me dame for thee, and ways me for the comely knight that sleeps beneath the tree." His cheek lies on the cold, cold clay, no belt, no brand has he. His blood is on a kinsman's spear, "Oh, ways dame for thee." My yeoman lie in the wood lady, my steed stands at the tree, and ye mandry a do for weird, oh mount and fly with me. What gauze cover of yeoman rides, a fastened belt and steel? What gauze a Jordan mount a steed, and scour or moor and dale? Why seek they up by Little Ford and down by Ferris Lynn? The heiress of the lands on earth is lost to all her kin. How lang, lang may her mother greet, down by the salt sea faem, and lang, lang may the Maxwells look afore the bride coming. Lang may every Douglas rue and ban the deed for aye. The deed was done that little bower about the break of day. Oh, will you walk the wood, lady, or will you walk the lea? I